If others could do it better than you, they would do it better than you. And that's a simple fact that isn't said enough. Welcome back. I'm going to show you the most common mistakes that presenters usually make and how to avoid them. Whether you're preparing for a presentation, interview, or you just want to sound more confident, avoiding these mistakes will take you a long way into more effectively communicating your message. The first mistake I usually see is a presenter opening up by saying, "Hi, my name is." Now, this usually just kills the momentum right off the bat, and it's something we're trying to avoid. Now, the best way to go about starting a presentation or a speech or just communicating with somebody is by stating a fact, a story, or asking them a question. This gives you an opening into the conversation and gives you something to talk about. You can introduce yourself later, and sometimes in day-to-day conversations, you might never even get to the fact that you have to introduce yourself to one another. What I mean by this is that if you're talking to somebody on the street or at the store, or you're just having a normal conversation with a random stranger just to pass time, there's no need to introduce yourself. You're going to be talking about some external factors, making small talk, and at no point will the introduction come into a factor. The same idea can be applied to a presentation or a speech. At the beginning, nobody cares who you are. They just want to see what you're going to talk about and if it's worth listening to. And that's why if you start with, "Hi, my name is, and today I'll be talking about this," then it just kills the momentum and the audience instantly loses attention. Avoid this within the first 30 seconds and you'll be off to a good start. The best time to introduce yourself is before you get into your first point and after the hook that you've done initially. The second most common mistake, either talking too fast or talking too slow. Usually the nervous speaker talks really fast at the beginning and then slows way down through the middle and through the end. What you want to do is talk slow at the beginning so that the audience can figure out who you are, what you're trying to talk about, and then speed it up during the boring parts, usually in the middle, and then slow it back down again at the end so it really drives home the point of your speech and your presentation. Talk to your audience like as if you're talking to a family member or a friend. It's actually the best practice to have somebody who you trust sitting in front of you and you practice in front of them and ask for their honest feedback. If they're saying you're talking too fast, then you're probably talking too fast. If you're talking too slow, then you're probably too slow of a speaker. Usually there's a time frame that you're supposed to be talking within. If you can't fit what you're trying to say within that time frame, then you're going to be talking about too many things. So cut it down. Focus on one topic. The third point, and this is the most important one, monotone voice. Oftentimes, you would see people falling asleep, zoning out, or just not even paying attention. They're on their phone. They don't care about what you're saying. Why is that? It's because your voice is monotoned. The level at which you speak does not change from the beginning to the end. I'm sure you're familiar with that feeling that when you're sitting on a plane and you're just listening to the sound of the engines for hours and hours on end, and you just zone out and you fall asleep. Oftentimes what happens is that if the speaker is monotoned, that also puts the audience to sleep, just like how the sound of airplane engines put passengers to sleep. The best way to avoid this mistake is to mark down specific areas that you have on your notes where you will ramp it up and you will slow it down, just like in the previous point, but also raise your voice if you're trying to make a point, and then slow it down and bring it down if you want the audience to lean in and listen to you. If you do these two things with regards to your speech cadence, then you will really captivate the audience. Mistake number 4, either too much eye contact or in most cases too little eye contact. Let's talk about it. When you get those nervous speakers, they're either looking at their notes like this and they're not making any eye contact and it sounds really monotone and there's nothing to listen to. Or you get the speaker which directly looks at one person and does not move because that's their favorite person, usually the teacher or the professor marking the presentation. The best way to avoid this situation is to look around. Find one person at one corner of the room, find another person at the other corner of the room, and then find two people in the middle. What you don't want to do is focus on one person for way too long, because that just makes it an uncomfortable situation. And what you also don't want to do is just look at your notes and don't look at anybody, because that situation will lead to the disconnect between your audience and yourself. Another thing you don't want to do is constantly look at your presentation and read off of a script like this. All of these are very easy things to do, but as long as you're self-aware of it and you get that honest criticism and feedback from your friends and family, then you can be sure to avoid it going forward. Mistake number 5, apologizing, which then leads to undermining yourself and your authority as a speaker. The most common time that you will see this is during the setup. You're fumbling with your computer, trying to connect the HDMI, trying to connect that USB stick. The slides aren't working, the transitions aren't working. For whatever reason, something is technically difficult, and you say to the audience, hey guys, sorry for the delay, sorry it's taking so long, blah, blah, blah. This first point that you say, even before your presentation, undermines your authority as a speaker, and that's something that you want to avoid. If you mess something up and you apologize to the audience, you just lost your authority. You don't want to be the person at the front that doesn't know what they're talking about. The image that you're trying to portray to the audience is that you're full of self-confidence and that you know what you're talking about. If you apologize before, during, or afterwards, even to yourself, even if you have that look of doubt in yourself, that will show to the audience, and that's not something you want to do. Mistake number 6, overloading your audience with too much information. Now, a common mistake is to stand up and try to give as much information as possible to your audience. The fact of the matter is that 5 minutes after your presentation is done, they're not going to remember 80% of it. So how do you fix this? You find a few key points that you want to hit, and those are your key driving points that you want the audience to go home with. Everything you say in your 5-minute presentation, your 1-hour-long presentation, has to come back to a few key points, and then what will happen in the audience's perspective is that those key points are the ones to remember, not anything else that connected it back to it. Another way to not overload your audience with information is to give them a point and then connect it with a metaphor, something that's used in day-to-day life. If your topic is very academic or it's very information heavy, try to lighten it up. If you take breaks using metaphors, then the audience has something to connect back to that original point that you were making. It gives them time to digest the information. The point that I want to make with this is that you want your audience to have a light bulb moment. If something clicks for them, if the light bulb goes off, you've made your point. You've conveyed your message. However, if you just brain dump information onto your audience, they're not going to remember any of it. And that's not what you're trying to do. You want to stand out in your presentation skills. Don't give them too much information. Give them information that's relevant to the points that you are making. The 7th and last mistake that happens way too often: reading word for word. You don't want to do that. Let me give you a sample of what this sounds like. You sound robotic when you read. Use cue cards or bullets. Practice the flow, not the script. You don't want to listen to that. What you want to listen to is me telling you and showing you with my hands, my eye contact, my voice, my cadence, the points I want to make. If you're reading off of a script word by word, you don't have the opportunity to use hand gestures because you're often holding it. If you're reading off of a script, you can't make eye contact with your audience. Why? Because you are reading off of a script. You don't even have that opportunity to look up and look at different people. What happens is that you're also undermining your authority because you don't know what you're saying. You have to read off of a script. If you had practiced enough, you would know what you're talking about. You can talk about it from heart. The best thing to do is to have cue cards and write your major points on it. Look at the main points, the points that you want to drive home to the audience, and then fill in the blanks between the points with things that you already know in your head, things that you've practiced. The best way to do this is to have those exact same points that you have on your cue cards also on your presentation behind you. That way the audience can follow along between the points that you're saying. Now, if you want to go a step further, what you can do is after your presentation, if it's for a work environment, you can have those bullet points set out and then put a paragraph of what you said or were going to say in that blank space. If you do this properly, the audience, the people listening to you, trying to get your message, will look at those bullet points and they will remember those for what they are. And if they need further information, then they can go into that paragraph and look at those details that you mentioned also in your presentation. Now, these 7 common mistakes, obviously everybody makes them. I still make them to this day. Nobody's asking you to be perfect. This is just about being conscious of what your flaws are and working to improve them and lessening the occurrence of these mistakes. The more you intentionally practice these skills and you're aware of them, the better you'll get over time. Let me know in the comment section which one of these mistakes you've made before and what you've done to fix them. If you got anything out of this video, please drop a like and subscribe for further public speaking and presentational skills, tips, and tricks. I have plenty of more videos to come, so stay tuned. Thank you and have a good day.